Miss Andrews, are you okay?
Definitely not. I'm actress Valerie Allen, and I play Amy Andrews in the new film, The Empty Space.
It's okay. Everything's gonna be okay.
A violent attack leaves her without her boyfriend, her home, her sense of self. Amy, like so many of us, suffers from mental illness. As she tries to get her life back together, she's haunted by terrifying visions that may or may not be real. Empty Space goes beyond the slasher and takes you deep into the void. We hope you join us as our film premieres on streaming. We also hope that not only are you frightened, but you gain some insight into a serious problem that affects so many people, including the filmmakers.
I know how it sounds. What if it's real?
The Empty Space, a terrifying new vision from director Andrew Hara.
Welcome to the Bomb Squad, guys. I hope you like that RoboCop retrospective that was either 1 or 2 weeks ago. If you haven't seen it yet, go check it out and see the Paul Verhoeven one. It takes place right before. It's a sequel to the prequel. They're not actually that closely related. I just want to talk about Paul Verhoeven. But yeah, welcome to the Bomb Squad, guys. We picked another header for you after Bait. Yes, this week we are talking about the 1999. We're staying in the 1999, guys. 1999 movie, The Insider, directed by Micheal Mann, directed by Eric Roth, who went on to write such cool things as Killer of the Flower Moon and Dune, and possibly Dune 2. Who knows? It stars Russell Crowe himself. Also, I didn't realize that Russell Crowe. We'll talk about this later. Russell Crowe himself. It stars Al Pacino. It stars Christopher Plummer. And it stars a bunch of people that you've
cast.
seen.
Yeah, Rip
like
Torn.
Philip Baker Hall shows up at the end for like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah, Dumbledore doing the most British Southern accent of all time.
Oh, he certainly was, John.
It was like every sentence would start British and end Southern.
Yeah.
And I want to see what the haters who hated fucking Brendan Fraser would think of Bruce McGill in this movie as an attorney, because he set the yelling up to 11.
Dude, that guy was so good. I love that guy.
I like what Michael Mann has.
Everyone in this is just popping off.
Oh, Josh,
there was so much.
Since you want to talk so much, why don't you tell us what this movie's about?
Well,
okay, I'll get my deposition heard.
Yeah.
Yeah. A former
Objection.
tobacco executive is on the outs. He's approached by 60 Minutes to do some an insider's look at the tobacco industry. And at first he's not going to take it, but then he gets all these crazy threats and he's like, I'm going for it. And then it's kind of them working together.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, Josh, but can you tell us about the very first part of the movie and tell us what they may or may not have done wrong, and what also all the other supporting characters did wrong, and how it can relate to the Palestine situation today?
I would rather not. I was like, oh man, he's interviewing Hezbollah in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Really fucking went back.
That's just to show what that's just to show he's hardcore and unflinching like journalism, you know.
Yeah, he gets blindfolded and doesn't give a fuck.
Right, and it's which is funny because you guys kept bringing this movie up when we were reviewing Body of Lies. Came up more than once, and I was like, is the only connection this first 10 minutes and Russell Crowe having gray hair and glasses?
Yes.
I do want to say, okay, so Russell Crowe plays the whistleblower and Al Pacino plays the 60 Minutes producer, and also Mike Wallace is played by Christopher Plummer. But I didn't realize, because in this movie, Russell Crowe has like gray hair. He has like white hair. I didn't realize he's supposed to be old. I thought he was just supposed to be a guy with white hair.
Yeah.
But he's apparently supposed to be like 20 years older than he was at the time. And it's like, you can't try to age up Gladiator's age.
I know.
That's so.
It was right before Gladiator. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought he did so good in this movie. Like, he's supposed to be like a socially awkward guy, and like the way he made his face go, like whenever he would like be in court, and like,
it was so real. like the first time, like, because okay, so essentially he's like, hey, can you come talk to me, and he's not sure, but then he does. The first time they meet in a hotel room, you're like, oh yeah, these are like two of the best actors who were just
Right.
Yeah.
only in like a lot of like, pretty bad roles these days, so it's like great to see them like pop off, and except for
Totally.
And
Scorsese
it's
movies.
and that
Yeah.
first scene, so that first scene when they meet in the hotel room is such a good scene because they're both playing very specific characters and they're playing the opposite of them, where like
Totally.
Russell Crowe is like this super awkward, nervous guy, but he's obviously
Mhm.
in that hotel and he wants to talk, you know?
Hmm.
And so he's trying to be kind of upfront, but it's not working because he's so awkward. And Al
Yeah.
Pacino is this kind of loud, no frills, like no bullshit kind of guy. But in that scene, he's trying to like invite Russell Crowe to like, hey, open up to me, you can trust
Yeah.
me. And so it's such an awkward scene, but it like kind of linchpins how good these two guys are, that not
Right.
only are they playing these like very specific roles, but they have such a grasp on them that they can kind of turn them on their head, you know?
Totally. And that's kind
Yeah.
of like how the relationship goes for the whole movie. Like every time they have a conversation, like Russell Crowe always gets weird, and then Al Pacino has to like angrily yet gently pull him back into the real world. And it's just like this push and pull between them the whole time. And their dynamic was just like so good. It was crazy.
Yeah, such like a power move, like, because when he's first there, he's like, well, I can't really stay long. He's like, all right, well, how do you want your coffee? And he's like objecting, but he still takes the coffee. It's like he knows he
Yeah.
has him, but he
Hmm.
Yeah.
has to like kind of just be like, no, we're doing this. Just
Yeah.
let's get comfortable. It's God.
Yeah. And
Teach
it
us
is
the movie
weird
with
because
good
like
acting.
essentially the whole movie is it's just kind of like Russell Crowe trying to decide if he wants to talk, and then they have to like figure out the legality because he has signed an NDA. And so it's a
Hmm.
lot of like boardroom talk, but this movie is so fucking tense, and it's like especially the score, kind of like the score is this kind of like it's almost feels like the same score from Gladiator. And so you're
Yeah, it
always
has that
expecting,
vocalization.
yeah, you're expecting things to really like, it keeps the intensity high because you're expecting things to constantly be happening.
Yeah.
And it's so, and like sometimes it's just Russell Crowe like getting in a taxi and going to the
Dude,
airport.
I was gonna say that. There's so many taxis and there's so many like intense looks down both ways of the street, and then they
Yeah.
just like go to the office. Mike, you fucked up.
Yeah,
Well,
and then like Mike Wallace just shows up. You know?
Yeah. Hey.
yeah, Mike
I will
Wallace
say,
not happy with his portrayal in this film.
William,
Really?
I think one of the coolest things about Michael Mann is he kind of like, he doesn't like to relegate these, especially when they're kind of older people, like real, especially in real life. But he doesn't like to relegate these older characters as into like side characters, because Mike Wallace could have very well been just nothing. And I think of Howard
Yeah.
Cosell, played by John Voight in Ali, where it's like he really brings the importance of this guy who's an expert at the field, you know.
Totally.
And it's kind of like, it's kind of cool because the way that, and I don't have any idea, apparently Mike Wallace was mad about this, but I don't have any idea how Mike Wallace was in real life. But
Mm-mm.
Christopher Plummer kind of plays him as this like old West cowboy, you know, who's like everyone loves
Yeah.
him, but he also knows when to turn it on and how to turn it on. Like
Right.
the first scene he's in is they're interviewing the people from Palestine, and they're and he's like getting in a fight because they're like, "Oh, can you move?" And he's like, "I'm not moving.
I
Like, I'm
don't
the
do an
star."
interview from over there.
Yeah, and he's like, "Well, they can move." And then and Al Pacino's like, "Okay, are you happy?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, I was just doing it to get my kind of spirits up for the interview."
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
he was arguing with in this movie. He's arguing with terrorists so
With
that
guns.
just
Straight
to
up
like
guns.
get a rise out of them so that he can feel something. If I was Mike
Yeah.
Wallace, I would have been like, "Yeah, that's exactly how it happened, guys." You know?
Yeah. I was a fucking badass. And I make
So-
no
Just a
apologies for
fucking
it.
cowboy.
So did you see that like 1 minute scene, because he's interviewing the Sheik, and it's like Cliff Curtis, who always plays like
Yeah.
Middle Easterners despite not being Middle Eastern.
I don't even know what he is because he's played like
He's from New
Asian, played
Zealand.
Mexican.
Yeah, he's played like every race but his own.
He's a
Yeah.
Mexican guy in Training Day who goes, "That's why I never shake his hand, home."
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I would say is racist, but I like the way he delivers that line, so he gets a pass.
Yeah. Training Day is a good movie.
You know what I thought was great, that like, because I didn't really know this story. I don't.
Mhm.
I wasn't following the news in '99. I was literally like a
I
freshman in
was in
high school.
fourth grade.
I know.
Josh lives in Portland, so he's not following the news now.
Listen,
Got him.
but no, when Russell Crowe's just kind of like he's called in to like the tobacco, like the office, and it's Michael Gambon, Dumbledore's like the head, like the president of the
Oh
company,
yeah.
Yeah.
and it's basically like the scene in Killers of the Flower Moon where he goes to the room with all the oil like barons, and it's just like, no, you're gonna
Yeah.
do this like where it's barely a
Well,
veiled
and
threat.
one of the things I
Yeah.
like about this is the kind of casual threats that everyone like when that guy, because he talks to those guys, the fucking tobacco guys, and they're sitting there and they're just kind of like relaxed, like leaning back in their chair, but they're like, if you say anything, like we're gonna extend your NDA and you're gonna
Yeah.
sign it, or you're not gonna get health care. You know, it's like just this way that it's like to them, it's just a write off. Like they don't give a shit.
Yeah,
you
like
know?
Right.
because he's already been fired at this point, and so it's just
Mhm.
it's not even like, oh, we're gonna fire you. It's like, no, you've already been fired. You're signing this so we don't ruin your life. And
Yeah.
really, you almost get the sense that the reason he goes so hard after that against them is just out of spite, you know? It's
Yeah,
just-
well,
Right.
that's.
Yeah.
I mean, he almost fucking says it in the dialogue, but it's definitely in the subtext that like that because he's on the fence, and they kind of get wind of that he might be talking or he might be disgruntled,
right.
so they bring him in to kind of subtly threaten him, and it's like that kind of pushes him over the edge where he's like, oh fuck this, like
Right.
I'm gonna do it now because you guys think you're better than me and you think you're untouchable.
Yeah. He
And
doesn't like
so,
to get
like,
pushed around. He literally says it himself.
and that's one of the things I liked about this is that like Russell Crowe is not like the savior. Like he doesn't have a real change of conscience. It's just like this is the best situation for him at the moment
Right. Right.
because he needs this and this. Yeah.
And they never like let you forget. Like whenever I saw this like as like a college student, like I didn't really care that much about his like family drama. I was just kind of like, no, dude, you have to get this story out. Like this is the most important thing of all time. And like watching it this time, like as an older person, it's just like he really was like his whole life was just going to be upended by this one conversation you might have with the news.
Yeah.
And like that was like that's there's the part whenever he freaks out in the hotel restaurant and Mike Wallace looks at Al Pacino and it's just like, what? Who are these people? And he's like, these are regular people under extreme pressure. Like, do you expect grace and consistency? And
Right.
it's like he really like his whole life was just like on the line the whole time. And like I never like really realized when I was younger how like scary that must be. But like I really felt bad for him and his whole family this time when I was watching it. Just like this
Yeah.
is like major. Like the court of public opinion is such a subtle thing. Like doing this story was gonna like change things incrementally over time. Like there wasn't gonna be like an award given to him at the end of all this. It was like what he was doing was gonna have like a chink in like the big tobacco armor, you know, and like getting more information about the addiction of cigarettes out there. And to do all that was just like so incredibly brave. And it's like a true story. And like I don't know if I could do that to even just Leslie and our dogs. We don't even have kids. But it's like
Right.
that's fucking crazy. Like this movie was like it's such a major thing to do. I don't know.
Well, and
Yeah.
it's also like, and he does make a good point too, because I think it is that same like where he's arguing in the restaurant where he's like, this could like all get out, and the public might not even care that much, you know, because it's like it could just be a flash in the pan or different news, like, and obviously in this case it led to like the biggest lawsuit of all time, so it truly did matter. But it's
Yeah.
like you really don't know, you know, like
Yeah.
you know, like when people leaked like whatever military, the guy who lives in Russia now. It's like, does anyone
Snowden.
still really care about that? Snowden, yeah. It's like,
yeah.
people are just like, that sucks. Let's move on. You know,
It's
so
like,
it's
yeah.
like,
And I think about that, like Snowden, that other weirdo guy. They're all
Assange.
weirdos.
Yeah.
Assange. Yeah, it's just kind of like you're doing this and you kind of hope people care, but like at the end of the day, it's just a TV show. Like,
Right.
like how often is it going to change things? And I think like,
right.
you know, because this movie didn't do that good, and I wonder if that's the case. Because like if you watch, the studio apparently wanted this to be like President's Men, like to do that. But if you watch President's Men, they bring down the presidency. You know, like there's like a direct action. But
there's a goal.
in this movie, it's like, oh, they knew that cigarettes are bad, and then they
Yeah.
just kind of like, we'll put a warning on it. Like,
Right.
Right. And I think specifically is like, oh, and then they were specifically making the chemicals even more addictive. And I mean, it's crazy too, because it's like, well, is like the state attorney of some state going to pursue this? And then at one point, like the state doing it, like the governor was suing his own like attorney general to like try to get
Yeah.
him to stop. It's like,
Right.
yeah, they're just big tobacco throwing money at everything to like
Right.
stop this, you
right.
know?
And I think it's that thing where we were kind of talking about this before the show, but it's like you don't realize how much this lobby or that lobby or this political action, how much influence it has until it really needs to spread its wings. And
Yeah.
in this movie it kind of shows where like there's literally people following him like to the golf
Hmm.
course, and they're not there to do anything, they're just there to let him know we can get to you at any point that we
Right.
want.
You are
You know?
powerless.
Right, because
And
it doesn't even it costs them barely anything to just have a guy
Yeah.
hang out and be like creepy. I
Yeah.
honestly though, because I didn't look up what happened. You know, it's one of those like, oh, I don't know the story. I'm just gonna like let it unfold on screen. I thought he might get like Michael Clayton fake suicided
I
like halfway
know,
through.
dude.
I was like, oh god, I was so like worried for him because they could
I
do
know.
that. It wouldn't cost them
Yeah.
that much, you know.
yeah.
And they could cover it up.
Well, and it's
Yeah.
funny because at one point, so what they kind of figure out, because he signed an NDA, so the way they try to get around it is they're going to have him testify in kind of a pre-trial, so that it can be on the record, and if something's on the record, it's not beholden to an NDA.
Right.
And if a lawyer thinks that something is you've broken a criminal law, then you can't say an NDA is stopping you because you can't NDAs can't protect you from criminal things.
Yeah.
And the way they get around it is they just like hope that you don't go to a lawyer. But anyway, so they go to this lawyer to kind of do it, and the lawyers are like, "We've been here before. Like we've been here for 20 years." And they always want to do it, and then they don't want to do it, And it's
Yeah.
just kind of showing like that these lawyers, and they're not like these lawyers are great lawyers. It's
Hmm.
just it's happened so much, and they constantly lose, that they're just kind of like they just want to make, they're like, there's no optimism in them. They're just like, well, let
Yeah.
us know if it's real, and if it's not real, we don't give a
It's
shit,
fine. This. Yeah. We've done this before.
Yeah.
Sequel number 5.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I think
Wait,
that like whistleblowers, just like through time, like All the President's Men, like this movie, Snowden and Assange, like I think that the court of public opinion that we're kind of seeing now, just like with whistleblowers in general, is just like, I don't know. I wasn't alive in the '60s, so I don't really know what it was like. But I feel like there's just like so much. It's just common knowledge that corporations and the government just completely exist to fuck everybody over, and like
right.
we really have no control over our lives. And I don't know if people like truly believed that in like a few decades ago, but I feel like everyone just, you cannot deny that anymore.
Yeah.
And like that's kind of like what the point of like all these whistleblowers has done. Like I know that tobacco is not necessarily about the government, but it kind of is. It's just like
Mhm.
anybody who has power can exact as much power over you as they want. And I don't know, there's power in knowing that. I think that's like cool, that we all just, that's no
Well,
longer like a punk rock ideal. That's just
Yeah,
like
it is
fact.
very. I mean, they've totally like done like studies on like millennials and like Zoomers, how like, and obviously it'll be like, Wall Street Journal putting an article being like, why don't Zoomers like respect their bosses anymore? It's like,
Right.
because they know that they don't care about you, and they'll fire you on a whim if like the company needs to like cut job. It's just like
Yeah.
totally a different power dynamic where it's like there's no belief that the system will ever work for you anymore.
Right.
You
So
know.
fuck the system.
and if you're young and you don't really remember all this, keep in mind that like the tobacco industry used to be kind of like the gun lobby, where like now
Yes.
the gun lobby, like they will stop even like politicians trying to even just get data on how many gun deaths or how many. And it was the same thing back then where they're like
Hmm.
they would do everything they could to try to stop these tests, because they knew what they were doing to the nicotine. They knew how bad the tobacco was,
Right.
but they weren't like, and at this point in time, they've already like they've said that tobacco is bad and can cause lung cancer, but what they weren't telling you was that they were making the nicotine so much more addictive, so
Hmm.
that you had to keep smoking.
Yeah.
And so it was that thing where it's like the way they were kind of getting around with it is like, we already said they're bad for you, like everything
Yeah.
else is on you. And it's like Yeah, but it's kind of like these conceits that were like
Hmm.
a gun. I can understand like the conversation where I need a gun to protect my family or want to go hunting or something.
Right.
But then that conversation ends when it turns into a machine gun. Like there's
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
kind of
It,
like
An ammonia-addled
it
machine
is.
gun.
It's
yeah,
funny in a weird way. It reminds me of the McDonald's hot coffee lawsuit, where everyone's like, "Oh, that lady's dumb." Like, of course,
Oh yeah.
coffee's hot, and it turned out the coffee was like
Scalding.
salty.
fourth degree
Yeah.
burn, like pulled from
Hmm.
a burning house fire hot, like literally
Right.
should never be that hot. And then,
Yeah.
McDonald's just spun it to be like, oh, this is ridiculous. Look at this
Yeah.
settlement,
Yeah.
and then that's kind of where, like,
And they
big,
haven't. They've
yeah,
been caught multiple times, like reheating their fucking coffee because they say it's easier to make it, and
yeah,
so it is that thing where it's like they were able to spin the story and make the story kind of go away because people were like, oh, it's ridiculous. And I think like
Yeah.
on the other end, that kind of so Al Pacino spends this whole time trying to get him to speak, and they do the interview, and he's like editing it, and then CBS Legal comes in and starts trying to shut it down, not because they think that they've done anything illegal, but because they think that as soon as the company tries to sue them, that's it. They have so much power. And
Hmm.
so it becomes this kind of struggle on Al Pacino's side where he's fighting for journalistic integrity against a corporation
Right.
that is like, well, we don't want to like there's like a sale going, like they're trying to sell CBS, and so they don't want
Hmm.
to
right,
do anything to rock the boat. And
Yeah.
it's like I used to work in the news, and as these corporations started to take over, you see like it's not a lot, it's not as much as people think, but there is these kind of like, oh, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way, and
Like
it
ways to spin a
does.
story or something.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Like I remember one of the big ones was that you they didn't care what you called the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare before it released, and then once it released and started getting popular, they said you can no longer refer to it as Obamacare. You have to refer to it as the Affordable Care Act. Now,
Mm.
is that technically wrong? No. And like it is a more official name. But it was clear that they wanted you to change stop calling it Obamacare because it was doing good, and
Stop
they
the
didn't want
association.
to
Yeah.
relate it to
Yeah.
Obama. And so it is that kind of stuff, and like I think
yeah,
like that's also interesting, and we've kind of seen that it's at the end of this Al Pacino, spoiler alerts, but Al Pacino quits because he thinks that 60 Minutes has lost its integrity, and
Right.
it's
It
like,
caused
oh
him to lie
boy,
to a source.
yeah, there should be a sequel called "This Dude Has to Live Through the Trump Era" because like
I know this
Yeah.
is such like small potatoes compared to now, but you know what I
Yeah.
actually thought was funny too, because they're kind of pointing out, they're like, hey, if we run this, it could be like legal liability, and he's like, oh well, like no, like it's all verified, like we've checked all the sources, this is all true. They're like,
hmm,
no, like literally we'll be sued because this is true, like
right,
because this true information could damage this tobacco company, like they'll have like possible like tort lawsuit against us or whatever. And it's and then that's kind of when Al Pacino does some digging, and he's like, oh, you're selling it, and he's like,
Hmm.
this lawyer is going to get 3 million for it, you're going to get 1.5 million. And it's like
Yeah.
it's Gina Gershon as like the corporate
Yeah.
lawyer, and then
yeah,
Steven
Even
Tobolowsky
Tobolowsky.
as like the
Yeah.
president's like, oh yeah, they're so good at playing these like evil fucking like corporate
Yeah.
assholes,
Yeah.
and
Super
perfect
clever.
casting this movie.
I
and one
know.
of
It
the
really
biggest things
was.
is because like they set up, especially from the beginning, that Mike Wallace and this guy are like the last real like harbingers of journalistic integrity.
Yeah. Al Pacino's like a revolutionary guy. He's like his
Yeah.
his whole house is decorated in like old like revolutionary propaganda, and like
Hmm.
he's kind of an anarch. They call him an anarchist at one point. And it's
Right.
like that. I love how they showed his struggle too. Of like, there's a point where Russell Crowe is like, "Well, you, the fucking martyr journalist, why do you work for 60 Minutes?" And he's like, "I still do the fucking tough stories, dude.
Yeah.
Don't question me." But you can tell he's like insecure about it because it's like he is now working for a place that does shit like bury stories that are important. And like, I feel like what was so cool about him is that he was telling Russell Crowe to like stick to his beliefs and stay true, and you're just like the whole time kind of waiting for like Al Pacino to like what's he gonna do about like his own whistleblowing scenario where they're bearing this story. And it was so badass that he fucking stuck to his guns too. Like it was just like I love that so much. That was like
You,
Yeah.
such a great part
you
of
know
this
what
movie.
I you know what I loved was and Andrew, you can relate to this, where even despite the fact that he was doing the right thing, at one point they're like, "What, are you going to quit over this?" He's like, "No." He's like, "I would rather just stay here because it's worse for you if you fire me than if I quit." So I would rather just
Which is also
make
what I
it.
told the news.
Yes, I would rather make it worse for you as long as I can and get
Right.
Well,
paid
and
for it.
and I think like that does. I mean, even subtly when I worked in the news, I mean, I always would tell people I got in the news because I'm a filmmaker and we use the same equipment. We
Yeah.
use it in very different ways. Like in film, you take a bunch of stuff and you try to make fake scenarios seem real, but in news, you take all your equipment and you try to make a real scenario feel more fake because you're putting a reporter in front of it, you're
Hmm.
giving her a light with no source, you're not showing any of the actual horror of it, you're showing a very cleaned up version. And it does become this thing, and like especially now as news has kind of ventured. When I was working there, I hope no one from the news is just listening to me right now. From my station. When I worked in the
You're
news,
powerless.
I worked the afternoon shift. We had 4 fucking shows to be in the live, and so how much journalism is really going on when you have to stop? You get there at 1, you get on meeting by 2, you have to
Hmm.
be live by 5, so you have to be ready by 4:30, and then you go live again at 10, and it's like, how much are you really getting done? And that's not even including the web stories and the fucking Facebook lives and bullshit like that.
You mean
And
like how much
so
investigating is being done?
exactly,
Oh,
like,
okay.
if there's something, because then you just end up relying on the fucking press releases that the
Yeah.
police send out because you don't have another choice.
Right.
And then like that availability to be relatable, where it's like, oh, get the neighbor to talk, and it's like, who can't, like, why would you want the neighbor to
Right.
talk? What does he have to say? Of course he's devastated. Someone just died in their neighborhood or whatever.
Right.
Do we
Right.
need to know that?
Yeah.
And so it is interesting to go back and and who knows, maybe this guy was not all as much as they make him. Maybe like Wallace wasn't either, but reporters really used to break stuff down, and like they still
Hmm.
do, but it's just like the reporters who actually break stories now or do stuff, they have to fight so much more bullshit that it's almost like more impressive.
Yeah.
And you kind of wish they would go back to this kind of thing where they would take their time.
I
Totally.
think that's why so many just like don't even. They're like, "Oh, we're just gonna have a Substack or whatever." It's just
Yeah.
because you can't balance like the corporate environment and like actually doing real shit. So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because when you need a story every single day, it's hard to get the real, like, dig into it, because tomorrow you need another story.
Yeah. Which it
And
is crazy.
yeah. And I think, like, it is that kind of thing where, like, Mike Wallace original, like, once they try to shut this story down, Mike Wallace, like, because Al Pacino's like, we're not going to put up with this shit. And Mike's like, oh, this time I
Yeah.
am, like,
I'm with
but
CBS on this one.
it becomes that thing where like every single story you're fighting for, if the real stories, you have to like be willing to like put your everything on the line, and
Hmm.
but you have to know when you're not going to do that.
Right.
And with this one, it's kind of like people needed to know that nicotine was deadly, but it's like we were saying earlier, like they already knew cigarettes were deadly, so what are we really telling the public?
Yeah. Just like finally
yeah,
getting
like,
it.
is this really important? Well, no, and I think that's why Mike Wallace was so not a fan of this movie, because like he almost has that conversation where he's like, "Hey, I'm retiring soon.
Hmm.
This is like my legacy isn't going to be like this is how I like leave the company, like
Right.
Yeah.
So at that point, he was more concerned with like what's the appearance going to be like, for me personally, like as I like leave, which
Yeah.
is a horrible way to look at it when you're like a journalist, but whatever,
Yeah.
you know.
But I mean, you also think like there has to be a little bit of like wanting to be in front of the camera if you want to be a
Yeah.
reporter.
To get all the
Eh,
way up to the
No,
60
yeah, I mean,
minutes
of
like
course,
great journalists for sure.
everyone wants to be like a cool rock star journalist. I assume.
I've
Um,
dreamt about it. I've dreamt about it.
you know what I also like too, and they almost like kind of gloss over this because the threats and the weird, like he finds like a bullet in his mailbox and stuff. Russell Crowe,
Yeah.
Wygant, and like Al Pacino's like, call the FBI, and the FBI are such dicks about it. They're
Yeah,
just
they take
like,
all this shit.
did you do this to yourself? You know, like they just like completely
Just
um
didn't give a shit.
like gloss over the threat. And like, yeah, at one point his wife, actress Diane Venora, mostly like stage like actress, but she's like looking at the computer, and then this like red flashing thing comes up that's just like, we will kill you. And then,
Yeah.
obviously she's like freaked out.
Yeah.
So it's like they're getting these like threats constantly.
Mhm.
And it's pretty good, because it's like, oh, that would be terrifying. Like that would
Yeah,
literally
yeah.
like ruin your life, even if nothing
Mhm.
really happened to you, if it was just every day like that.
Right. Just
I
the
guess I'm
threat
saying I
of
understand
losing
why
you,
she
dude.
like leaves him.
Totally. Yeah. I'm
Yeah.
surprised she didn't do it sooner. And like he's like the worst, like I don't like what he did was great, but like he is not somebody who's built for like relationships at all. Like whenever
Yeah.
he's like going to go talk to Lowell for the first time, he doesn't even tell her that he's going to do this interview that's totally going to like disrupt their
Yeah.
entire life. And he's just like, yeah, that's what we're doing, honey. And she's like, "Well, I'm out." And it's like, "Fuck yeah, you are, dude. Like, don't be around this guy. He does not care
And
about your
also,
well-being."
how do you do that right in front of fucking Mike Wallace? Like, imagine
I
if
know.
fucking
Yeah,
you're like at a meeting with Alex Jones, and your wife's like, "Oh, the biggest, the most hard hitting reporter, Alex Jones."
Yeah,
yeah,
it's the
yeah.
first one that comes to mind. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny because Mike Wallace apparently was mad that it showed that he didn't do a lot of his own reporting. And it's kind of like, yeah, if you watch the movie, I could see Mike Wallace also being mad that the movie showed that he wasn't doing a lot of his own reporting. So it's like
Yeah.
him being mad is kind of like, oh, that makes sense in what I've seen about his character.
But that
you know?
and that's
Yeah.
and that's also like, so like, I would never assume, like, it's like, do you think John Oliver writes all his own jokes? Of course there's like 12
Right.
people just back
Right,
Finding meta
there.
right.
stories.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right, like researching and doing like funny lines. No, yeah, and then they kind of have to, like, they have to move from their like mansion into like a regular middle class house, and it's like, what a downgrade. It's like they still have like a bigger yard than I've ever had in my
I
life.
Yeah,
know.
it was still nice.
He
He drove
becomes
a Volvo.
He
Yeah,
becomes a teacher just by kind of asking, you know?
I
yeah.
know.
He,
You
he
need a
does have
degree,
a
motherfucker.
he has a chemistry degree, so that's
Yeah.
they do cover it.
So,
You
believe
want
me,
to
buddy, I've looked.
Education.
You also need other things.
Yeah.
do you want to know how 90s this movie is? His daughter was the Pepsi girl.
Yes.
Oh, I know.
And do you
Yeah,
know who her brother is?
yeah, Jesse Eisenberg, right?
Yes, I had no
Yeah,
idea.
I,
That's
Oh
I
fucking
learned that
yeah.
crazy.
last night. How
Yeah.
weird. I don't know
She
what
was
she's up to now, but
probably just living off that
Oh yeah.
insider money.
living off
Oh yeah.
that "now you see me too" money.
Wasn't she
Yeah.
in Matilda?
I don't
No,
know.
that's
she
Mara
Matilda?
Wilson.
Oh.
Different
She
last
might
name,
have been
Andrew.
like an earlier scene or something, but I know she was in Bicentennial Man. So I actually that
Yeah.
came on Tubi one time, like just randomly.
Apparently, yeah. Interesting. Interesting.
Yeah.
And I don't know, to me, like, I'm pretty down on most, um what do you call it, like, based on a true story dramas.
Yeah.
Like, I was a huge hater watching Argo. I was like, this isn't as good as everyone says, and it's Ben Affleck, who I love.
Yeah.
um
It was okay.
but this was
I
like
go fucking
great.
rocks, you idiot.
I'm saying this was like legit. I was like hooked right away.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like as intense as Heat with like no guns. It's insane how good this movie is. Just
Yeah,
like
it's really
super
good.
solid. Yeah. Like
It
the
really
camera
flies
work,
by
everything.
despite being like 2.5 hours.
Yeah,
I
no,
know,
it's-
I know. You can tell that it's long, but like you want to know so bad what's gonna happen.
And like I said,
Yeah.
it's just like I said, you've probably seen so many bad like one-off Al Pacino and like an Adam Sandler cameo stuff. It's like, no, he's one of the best actors. Like, watch this.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I liked how they showed like they show Russell Crowe's family, and like even at the beginning, like he and his wife like don't really hang. Like it wasn't like a very solid system in general, and like
Yeah.
whenever he quits, like all she's worried about is like, well, I mean, obviously she's worried about what their family's gonna do, but like they didn't really paint her character as like being super helpful in the situation, and like granted she is terrified out of her mind, but
Yeah.
then they show like Lowell's family, and like he and his wife are in bed together just reading the newspaper,
Yeah, they're
chilling, and like his
hugging.
kids, yeah, and like his kids come in and he like gives him a high five, like not even cheesy, but it's just like they just show these like two different support systems that like Russell Crowe doesn't have the whole movie, and like Lowell has like support from his job until the end and from his family the whole time, and like it really just shows how alone Russell Crowe is for like a majority of the film, and like it really, I feel like that really impacts like the intensity that we see like from the story, just like how much he had to lose and how much he didn't even have in the first place.
Yeah, it's like there's a part where you think he might literally kill himself because they're like airing the story without him, and Al Pacino's like been exiled. Like he hasn't been fired or quit yet, but he's been exiled. So he's literally just at like this nice beach house, and he's like trying to call him from the beach to be like, "Hey, it's okay, man. I know how you feel." It's like, man, you're at your beach house. You don't know how I feel with like your loving wife.
Yeah, you're gonna watch a movie later.
But was that because he wanted to show the difference, or is that because he just likes to watch Al Pacino have a super hot fucking spouse? Because he does the same thing in Heat.
That
He's
could
like,
be it.
give her like a fucking, give him a super hot spouse. He's only in there for like 2 seconds.
And it is really cool to see him on the beach with the cell phone. That's but so many good shots of this
guy.
movie.
Really
William, who's that? Oh, Josh. That guy who's like trying to get him. There's a hotel clerk who's like trying to get him.
Oh yeah, I don't know who the clerk
guy,
is.
That's the guy from 30 Rock who the censor guy who Liz Lemon is trying to like.
Oh, she tries to seduce him.
She tries to seduce him for
and
then he's like, "You're the first person I've dated since my wife died."
That's crazy. I did not make that connection.
Yeah, that guy's always in like smaller roles, but I think he's an American Gangster too. I think he plays a cop at the very end or something.
Maybe I can.
He's also in an episode of SVU we were just watching today. So it's like that dude's just
damn, he's just following you around
all over the place. Yeah, I don't know his name though, but he's like an entertaining guy.
He's like, tell him to pick up the fucking phone. He's like, I can't say that, sir.
That, no. And then he does, and Russell Crowe just like
grabs it. Yeah,
it's so good.
Such a good scene.
Yeah. Yeah, every scene is just fucking dynamite, man. It did have such like Michael Clayton vibes too, like which
I kind of want to watch
such a good movie.
Well, Michael Clayton is 5 out of 5. This is like close
the best.
though.
Yeah. I love corporate espionage. That's like one of my favorite things.
But it's so hard to get right, and like
you know,
to make it scary.
Yeah, you know it's funny too, and I guess this did happen in real life. Because they try to intimidate him. His family leaves, but he's still going through with it. So then they try to do like a media smear campaign to be like, look, he's gotten like DUIs and his first wife hates him and stuff. But it's like, imagine it's like 1999 and it's like, why is the news running a story on this former to like, it's not like he's a celebrity already. Like it's like, this is such an obvious smear job. And apparently people took it that way at the time. They're like, yeah, why are you bringing up his like traffic tickets? Like this, that just makes you believe that what he's doing is true, you know? Like
it's not even anything big or major. It's just petty bullshit.
It's so funny because it's like, I feel like people would call that out today, but it's like, no, it was so blatant even back then. But I think it's like the tobacco industry was just so powerful. They're like, nothing can touch us. We'll just do all of the things, you know, that we would do in this case and it'll work. But it didn't.
Another funny thing is that the Unabomber is also blowing people up at the same time.
Oh yeah,
treated as such like a nothing story,
like an after, like oh, isn't this weird? And
then they catch him at the end, and he just kind of gets a heads up, but he doesn't give it to anyone.
Yeah, he's just like, I'm out, y'all. I don't even give a shit about the bomber.
Just quit. He's like, fuck you. But yeah, and then he goes to work for PBS, which he worked for Frontline, which is funny because I used to watch Frontline. It's a very good show.
I mean, 60 Minutes for like that's all like every Sunday my parents would watch it. Like, so it really was this like trusted institution throughout the whole 90s. You know?
That stopwatch, I can still see it to this day.
I know, I can hear it. Yeah,
it's very ominous opening for a show.
Yeah,
it'd let you know it was serious.
Yeah, we're not fucking.
But yeah, again, it's so funny. Like kind of what we were talking about with Houses of Lies, where it's like the kind of stuff we were looking at in 1999. It was this kind of like a lot of these movies feel like a wake up call. Like, hey, you can catch a tobacco company doing a million things, and they're gonna keep trying to do more things. Like corporations do not care if you live; they just want you to keep giving them money until the next guy And it's kind of like it's so funny because again, after 9/11, it just kind of it takes a while for art to get really creative again.
Mhm.
And then like luckily the Marvels comes out and you're like, this is it.
Something's about to happen.
You're like,
you
oh
know,
my
I was
god, there's two Spider-Mans in this
I
movie.
was
Art
thinking
achieved.
that when she sees like we're going to kill you and runs out of the house on her computer, it's like, man, now you want that death threat, just say something mildly critical of any superhero movie on Twitter, and you'll
Yeah.
have like 20 of those guys posting
Not
your
on our watch.
address.
Yeah.
But yeah, Insider. It's a good movie. You should check it
Very good
out.
Yeah,
And
movie.
it's really good.
Yeah.
It's not street. Well, it's on you. It's just straight up on YouTube, like probably illegally. So just go watch it there. But
Yeah.
yeah,
I rented it on YouTube.
I rented it on YouTube too. It was worth it though, because it's only like $3. What
Yeah.
better way to spend your Thanksgiving? Oh, it's not gonna be Thanksgiving. Whatever. What better way to spend it than Insider? Go
to
back in
spend
time.
early December or mid
Yeah.
December, I guess.
You're like,
Watching
let's
The
get out of the
Insider.
cold and watch Al Pacino.
And I mean, I will say this is kind of like a Christmassy feeling movie. Like it doesn't like it's not that violent or like gross, and so it's kind of like it's a family movie if your family is into like thrillers.
Especially
So
Yeah,
I would
I
watch
feel
this with my
like
family.
I feel like Michael Mann is like like him and David Fincher have very similar style. So if you
Yeah.
like The Killer, go check out this one.
yeah,
You
yeah. It
like
has like similar
scary movies.
vibes.
Mhm.
Yeah, a family like an adult family movie. Don't
Yes,
watch it with
correct.
your kids. They'd be bored
Right.
out of their minds.
Yeah, yeah,
But I assume you mean you're the child and your parents are the adults, but you're an adult yourself.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
right.
It's like good.
I'm glad Josh got the
Just explaining how ages
got
and
the
time
canon
Correct.
works.
of William's
It just keeps on going.
hypothetical story. Correct. We don't wanna
Yeah,
lose
but maybe one of our subscribers is like, cool, I'll put on The Insider for my 5-year-old.
our
He'll
subscribers
love
checked
it.
Yes.
out a long
Shut
time
him
ago,
up.
all right? They don't watch it all the way to the end. I'm just kidding, guys. Hopefully you do. Who knows? But yeah, go watch The Insider. We'll be back next week, maybe with more Russell Crowe, maybe with less Russell Crowe. Who knows? It's Russell Crowe December.
Yeah.
Yes, we'll see you guys next week. Go check out the deep dive. Go check out the shorts. Check out the empty space. That has got to get paid. It's Christmas time. All right. See you guys.
Bye.